The studio lights dim slightly as the audience settles in, unaware that today's episode of the Dr. Phil Show will become one of the most unforgettable moments in the program's history. Dr. Phil walks onto the stage with a noticeably serious expression, not his usual steady calm, but something much heavier. He looks directly into the camera and says, "Today, something happened backstage that none of us were prepared for. And you're about to see why we had to stop the show." The audience murmurs, exchanging worried glances. Sitting on the stage is a family of four, a mother, a father, and their two adult children. They're holding hands tightly, their faces pale with a mix of anxiety and hope. They've come here searching for answers about someone who disappeared 30 years ago, someone they've never been able to forget. Dr. Phil introduces them one by one, speaking softly, respectfully. Maria and Daniel have lived with a question mark hovering over their lives for 3 decades, he begins. 30 years ago, Maria's brother, David, vanished without a trace. No note, no phone call, no explanation. Just gone. Maria's voice trembles as she explains the nightmare that began that day. She describes waking up, finding David's room empty, and realizing that nothing was where it should have been. For years, she told herself it was a misunderstanding, that he would walk through the door any moment. But he never did. "We tried everything," Dr. Phil, Maria whispers. "Police reports, private investigators, we begged for help. Nobody found anything." Daniel squeezes her shoulder gently, his own voice cracking as he describes how the disappearance tore their entire family apart. Birthdays, weddings, holidays. Every event was marked by the same empty chair, the same unanswered question. Dr. Phil nods thoughtfully, but his eyes reveal that he knows more than he's saying. What the family doesn't know yet is that just minutes before taping this episode, the production team received new evidence. Something so shocking, so unexpected, that Dr. Phil had to make a sudden decision. Stop the show, hold everything, reassess everything they thought they knew. He turns back to the family and takes a slow breath. "Before we go any further," he says, "there's something you all need to see. And it may change everything you've believed for the last 30 years. The studio goes silent. The story is about to begin. Dr. Phil clicks a remote, and a large screen behind the family lights up with the title, "The Day Everything Changed." Maria instantly looks down at her hands. Daniel wraps his arm around her, bracing for whatever is coming. Their 2 children, now adults, shift nervously in their seats. They weren't even born when the disappearance happened, but they grew up hearing stories about their missing uncle, the man the family loved but never found. Dr. Phil turns to the audience. "Before we go deeper," he says, "I want everyone watching right now, wherever you are, to tell us which country or city you're watching from. Stories like this don't just affect families, they touch people across the world." Then he begins. The screen fades into an old photo, a young man smiling at the camera. David. Maria's shoulder shudders the moment she sees it. "We were inseparable," she whispers. "He wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend." Dr. Phil nods gently. "Your entire family describes David as the glue that held everyone together." Maria wipes her eyes. "He was kind. He was responsible. He would never just leave." But that was exactly what it looked like. One morning, 30 years ago, Maria went to wake David for breakfast. His room was neat. The bed was made. His wallet was still on the table. His shoes, his favorite pair, were lined up by the door. But he was gone. "He didn't take anything," Daniel adds quietly. "Not his ID, not his money, not even a jacket. He just disappeared." The police launched an inquiry, but weeks turned into months. Months into years. No body, no sightings, no phone calls, nothing. It was as if David had been erased from the world without leaving fingerprints of existence behind. Dr. Phil leans forward. "Your family gave investigators 3 different stories about the last day anyone saw David." "What?" Maria flinches, clearly uncomfortable. "We were confused," she says. "Everyone remembered it differently. Or maybe everyone wanted to remember it differently." Daniel clears his throat. "There was tension in the family back then," he admits. "Arguments. Secrets. People accusing each other of hiding things. Dr. Phil taps the remote again. A transcript appears on the screen, statements from the original investigation. One says David left for work that morning. Another claims he was home all day. A third says he left after receiving a mysterious phone call. The contradictions were a major reason the case went cold. I always wondered, Maria says softly. Did someone in the family know more than they said? The room feels heavier after her words. Even Dr. Phil pauses for a moment. Over the next decades, the family grew apart. Every holiday became a bitter reminder. Every unanswered phone call a punch to the heart. Daniel explains how he and Maria nearly divorced under the stress. I blamed her, he admits. I thought she was hiding something. That maybe she knew where he went. Maria breaks down crying. You accused me of lying for years, she whispers. Their children sit between them, both visibly shaken. We grew up feeling like our house was haunted, the daughter says. Not by a ghost, but by questions. Every family photo had a space where David should have been. Every celebration ended with tears. Every argument circled back to one name. David. Dr. Phil raises a hand, signaling for calm. Earlier today, he says, our team was given access to records that were not available 30 years ago. Technology, databases, and digital archives have changed dramatically since then. Maria's eyes widen. What does that mean? Dr. Phil's voice drops lower. It means we may finally know what happened to your brother. Gasps ripple through the studio audience. The screen behind them displays a blurred document. We received this, Dr. Phil continues, from a federal agency this morning. It contains information about a man matching David's description who was registered under a different identity, in a completely different state. Maria covers her mouth. Her son whispers, "Oh my God." But Dr. Phil isn't finished. We also discovered, he says, clicking to the next slide, that someone attempted to access David's old bank account less than 2 years ago. Maria's knees weaken. Daniel grabs her hand. That's impossible, she whispers. If he was alive, why didn't he come home? Why didn't he call us? Before Dr. Phil can answer, Maria's daughter suddenly speaks. What if he left because of something that happened? Something none of us knew about. Her voice trembles, and the question hangs over the room like a thick fog. Dr. Phil interlocks his fingers and leans forward. Those are the questions, he says, that may get answered today. But I'm going to warn you all, the truth behind a 30-year disappearance is rarely simple, and it's rarely painless. He glances at the camera. And for everyone watching, stay with us. Because what comes next changes everything. The lights in the studio felt sharper, almost too bright, as if highlighting every emotion etched on the family's faces. The air was thick with tension. The revelation from the previous segment, the possibility that Thomas might have been alive after all, still hung over them like a heavy cloud. Linda, the mother, clutched a tissue tightly, twisting it as if holding onto it could somehow contain the storm of emotions inside her. Mark, her son, sat rigidly, arms crossed, jaw tight, while Rachel, the daughter, leaned forward, eyes darting between her mother and Dr. Phil, trying to brace herself for whatever came next. Dr. Phil spoke softly but firmly. I know this is difficult. What you're about to hear may shake everything you thought you knew. He paused, then glanced into the camera. And to everyone watching at home, I want to ask you something. What would you do if someone in your family vanished without a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters, because today we're exploring emotions every family faces when the unknown takes over. The studio seemed to hold its collective breath. Even the audience leaned forward in their seats, as if the engagement itself pulled them closer to the unfolding story. Michael, Linda's son, finally spoke, his voice low and trembling. Mom, there's something I never told you. Linda's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. Dr. Phil raised a gentle hand. Michael, take a breath. This family has lived with secrets for decades. But now is the moment for truth. Michael swallowed hard, gripping the edge of his chair. I overheard a phone call when I was 12. Grandpa, he said he knew why David left, that it was better this way. I asked what he meant, and he told me never to mention it again. The room froze. Linda covered her mouth with her hands, her face paling. Dr. Phil leaned in slightly. And you kept that to yourself all these years. I was scared, Michael admitted. Scared it would make things worse. Dr. Phil nodded solemnly. Secrets like that can weigh on a family for decades. Sharing them is never easy, but it's necessary for understanding. Daniel, the father, suddenly straightened. His voice shook. There's something I need to confess to. Linda turned sharply toward him. Daniel. No, he interrupted. You need to hear this. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Years ago, before the kids, I found a box in the basement, David's things, hidden behind paint cans. Linda gasped. What? Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know who to trust, Daniel admitted. Inside the box were letters addressed to David, from a woman named Claire. Maria's eyes widened in disbelief. Claire? I don't know anyone by that name. Dr. Phil interjected calmly. And you read the letters? Daniel nodded. One of them said, You can't hide this forever. I didn't know what it meant, but it haunted me. The room was silent. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for her father's arm. All this time, we've been living in shadows, she whispered. Dr. Phil looked toward the audience and softly prompted. For those watching, have you ever had a family secret that changed everything once revealed? Share your story in the comments. How would you feel if you were in their shoes? Linda buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I didn't want to hurt you or anyone. I thought silence would protect us. Mark shook his head, anger and grief mixing. But all it did was haunt us. Dr. Phil leaned back slightly, allowing the weight of emotions to settle. This is the reality of hidden truths. They affect everyone, across generations. But today, we're confronting them, and that is the first step toward understanding and healing. Linda looked at her children, finally meeting their eyes. I wish I had told you sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't understand, afraid you'd hate me. I didn't know how to face it. Rachel's voice broke. We may not understand it yet, but we need to hear everything. No more secrets. Dr. Phil nodded, allowing the moment to resonate with everyone present. And somewhere between heartbreak and revelation, the family began to confront the long-buried truths that had haunted them for decades. The studio felt heavier the moment the family returned from the break. The air carried a tension that every audience member could sense, even through the bright lights and polished decor. Dr. Phil sat forward in his chair, elbows resting lightly on his knees, eyes focused, calm, professional, but unmistakably serious. He knew what was coming next would either break this family apart or finally reveal the truth they had avoided for decades. Across from him, the family sat in 3 separate seats, almost symbolic. Linda, the mother, clutched a tissue in both hands, twisting it nervously. Her son, Mark, leaned back stiffly, arms crossed tight over his chest. And on the other end, Rachel, the daughter, sat perched on the edge of her seat, eyes darting between her mother and Dr. Phil as if trying to prepare for whatever bomb was about to drop. The silence stretched until Dr. Phil finally spoke. During our investigation, he began slowly, we uncovered some inconsistencies in the story you've all believed for 30 years. Linda inhaled sharply, as though bracing against a blow. Dr. Phil continued, You told us your husband, Thomas, disappeared suddenly. No suspects, no contact, no belongings found. But that's not entirely accurate. Rachel's fingers tightened around the arm of her chair. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Phil said, locking eyes with Linda, there was more you didn't share. With your children and with law enforcement. The room froze. You could almost hear the audience holding their collective breath. Linda blinked hard, her voice trembling. I don't know what you're talking about. But Dr. Phil wasn't reading from speculation. He had documentation, timelines, reports, evidence the family had never seen. And now, it was time to put everything on the table. He picked up a folder from the table next to him, flipping it open. Our team found financial records from the months leading up to Thomas's disappearance. Withdrawals, transfers, and a second bank account he shared with someone whose identity is not yet confirmed. Both children snapped their heads toward their mother. A second account, Mark echoed, disbelief turning into irritation. We also found, Dr. Phil went on, letters addressed to someone named M. written in your husband's handwriting. The studio erupted in murmurs, gasps, whispers. The cameras zoomed in to capture the reactions. This was no longer just a disappearance story. This was the moment truth was threatening to crack the foundation of a family who had lived 3 decades in emotional uncertainty. Linda exhaled shakily, wiping tears that weren't even falling yet. I didn't know about any letters, she whispered. But Dr. Phil didn't look away. That's not all. Rachel's voice broke as she leaned forward. Mom, please, just tell us what's going on. Linda pressed the tissue to her mouth. She was shaking. She looked like someone who had kept secrets for so long that saying them out loud would feel like ripping off her own skin. Dr. Phil gently placed another document on the table. There was also a witness. Someone who claims they saw Thomas the night he disappeared. Someone who remembers an argument. Mark's eyes widened. Argument? With who? Again, everyone looked at Linda. At that moment, she seemed impossibly small. Fragile. Like a truth she'd buried deep inside herself was forcing its way out for the first time. I didn't tell you, she said, voice barely a whisper. Because I wanted to protect you. Rachel's breath caught. From what? Linda shook her head. From the reality that your father wasn't who you thought he was. A stunned silence fell over the room. Even Dr. Phil paused, allowing the weight of those words to land. Finally, he leaned in gently. Linda, it's time to be honest. Your children, and this investigation, cannot move forward without the full truth. What really happened before Thomas disappeared? Linda squeezed her eyes shut, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. He was planning to leave us. The studio gasped. She covered her face with her hands. I found out weeks before he vanished. He wasn't taken. He wasn't kidnapped. He was going to walk away. From all of us. Mark's jaw dropped. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. Not surprised, not judgmental, but steady. And you never told anyone. I couldn't, Linda cried. I didn't want my children growing up thinking their father abandoned them. So I let everyone believe he disappeared. I thought the lie would be kinder than the truth. But the truth, 30 years later, had finally arrived. And it was only going to get heavier from here. The audience sat in stunned silence, but Dr. Phil didn't look away. He could tell Linda wasn't done, not even close. A confession like that didn't sit on top of the story. It was a sign that much deeper truths were buried underneath. The cameras zoomed in as he leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. Linda, he said, you said your husband planned to leave. But that still doesn't explain the disappearance. If he intended to walk away, there should have been some sign, activity on his accounts, phone calls, sightings. Yet there was nothing. Not for 3 decades. That's not normal. So what happened after that argument? Linda took another trembling breath. Her hands twisted the tissue until it nearly tore. There were things I couldn't tell anyone. Mark sat rigid, his face turning red. Mom, you lied to us our whole lives. I was trying to protect you, she pleaded. Protect us from what? He snapped. From the truth? From knowing the kind of man he was? Or from something you did? The question cut through the room like a blade. Even Dr. Phil lifted his eyebrows at the boldness of it. Rachel reached over and touched her brother's arm, but he jerked away, his focus locked on their mother. Linda shook her head vigorously. No, I didn't hurt him. I swear. But I did make a choice that changed everything. Dr. Phil's voice softened, but his eyes remained intensely focused. Tell us what choice you made. Linda looked down, struggling to breathe. Then, with a voice that sounded like it was coming from a much older version of herself, she finally spoke. The night he left, he wasn't alone. Rachel's hand slipped from her mouth in shock. What do you mean? He left with someone, Linda whispered. A woman. Younger. Someone he'd been seeing on the side. He said he loved her. He said they were starting a new life together. The audience gasped loud enough that studio mics picked it up. Dr. Phil nodded once, absorbing the information. So your husband was having an affair. Linda nodded helplessly. For almost a year. And I found out too late. He told me he felt trapped in our life. That he didn't want to be a father anymore. He said he was suffocating. Rachel looked like she had been slapped. Tears streamed down her face, and she shook her head as if trying to erase the words. But why didn't you tell us? She cried. We deserve to know he wasn't the hero we imagined. You were children. Linda sobbed. I didn't want you to feel abandoned. I thought if he just disappeared, at least you wouldn't think he walked out because he didn't love you. Mark clenched his fists. So you let us spend decades wondering if he was dead? If someone hurt him? If he might come home? You let us suffer for a lot. Dr. Phil raised a hand gently toward Mark. Son, your feelings are valid. But we need to hear the full story. Linda, what happened after he left with this woman? Linda looked at Dr. Phil, truly looked, like she was begging him to understand her burden. I didn't know what to do. I was devastated. But the next morning, the woman's sister came to my door. The room froze again. She said they never made it to their destination, that no one had heard from them since they drove off. Rachel blinked in confusion. Wait, so they disappeared too? Linda nodded miserably. Yes, both of them. No one saw them again. Dr. Phil's expression sharpened. And you didn't think to tell the police that your husband was with another woman when he vanished? I was afraid, she cried. Afraid they'd blame me. Afraid they'd drag our family through the mud. And I didn't want you two to hate your father. I thought, maybe if no one knew, the truth would fade away. Mark stared at her in disbelief. But it didn't fade. It haunted us. Dr. Phil took a deep breath. Linda, secrets like this never protect children, they imprison them. And for 30 years, your family has been living in the consequences. Linda broke down completely, face buried in her hands. Rachel wiped her eyes roughly. So now what? Are they dead? Did they run away and hide? Did something happen to them? Everyone turned to Dr. Phil, and he nodded slowly. That, he said calmly, is exactly what we're about to reveal. Because our investigation found something you've never been told. The entire studio leaned forward. And for the first time, even Linda looked afraid of the truth that was coming next. The studio was deathly silent as Dr. Phil adjusted his chair, glancing at the family. Linda's hands trembled in her lap, her face pale and drawn. Rachel and Mark sat forward, gripping each other's arms, anticipation and fear etched into their expressions. Dr. Phil took a deep breath. What you're about to see may change everything you thought you knew, he began, his voice calm but heavy. And for everyone watching at home, I want you to think about this. If you were in their shoes, discovering a secret like this after 30 years, how would you react? Type your feelings in the comments below and let us know. The cameras focused on the family, who were frozen in silence. Dr. Phil opened a folder on his lap, revealing documents, maps, and photographs that had been uncovered during the show's investigation. Our team traced the last known movements of Monica Pierce, the woman Thomas left with, he explained. Her sister filed a missing persons report the night they disappeared. That report, along with newly discovered evidence, points us to the location of an accident that had never been investigated thoroughly. Linda's eyes widened. An accident? You mean? Dr. Phil nodded gently. Yes, our team located a vehicle off a rural highway, a rusted, overturned car that had been hidden in brush and debris for decades. Forensic analysis suggests it belonged to Thomas and Monica, and initial reports indicate the remains inside are likely theirs. Rachel gasped, burying her face in her hands. Mark leaned forward, frozen in disbelief. Linda's body shook as if the ground beneath her had disappeared. Dr. Phil spoke softly. This is the reality they lived and died in. After all this time, the answers are finally here. And it's natural for a family to feel anger, sorrow, even betrayal. But we also have a responsibility to face the truth with courage. Linda's voice broke. All these years, I thought I was protecting my children. I didn't know what else to do. Mark whispered harshly. Protect us? You kept us guessing for decades. Dr. Phil held up a hand. I understand your anger. But remember, the choices made were human, flawed, but human. The important thing now is to learn from them and support each other in processing the grief and closure that has finally arrived. Rachel's tear-streaked face lifted. So, they really didn't just walk away. They died in that accident. Yes, Dr. Phil confirmed. And though the truth is painful, it brings clarity. It explains everything that was confusing, and it gives you the opportunity to finally grieve properly. No more imagining, no more unanswered questions. Dr. Phil turned to the camera. To everyone watching, take a moment. Imagine discovering a truth like this after 30 years. What would you feel? Relief, anger, heartbreak? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your reactions. Linda reached for her children's hands, holding them tightly. I wish I could go back, she said softly. But I hope we can heal now. Mark nodded, his face softening. We will. It's not easy, but at least we know. That's something. Rachel, still wiping her tears, added. The unknown haunted us for so long. Now, we can finally face reality together. The cameras captured every tear, every gesture of reconciliation. Dr. Phil leaned back slightly, allowing the moment to resonate with everyone watching. This family story shows the power of truth, even after decades, he said. It may hurt, it may shock, but it is the key to healing, understanding, and eventually, peace. The audience in the studio nodded quietly. Comments began appearing rapidly on social media as viewers typed responses to the engagement prompts, sharing stories of their own family secrets, the shock of hidden truths, and the relief that closure can bring. For the first time in 30 years, Linda, Rachel, and Mark could breathe without the weight of uncertainty. And for everyone watching at home, the story was a reminder. Facing the truth, no matter how painful, is the first step toward freedom, understanding, and healing. The studio felt lighter now, though the weight of 30 years of unanswered questions still lingered in every corner. The family sat together, shoulders touching, hands intertwined, connected in ways they hadn't been for decades. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his gaze steady, letting the gravity of the past moments settle. Today, he said, you finally know the truth about Thomas. You know what really happened the night he disappeared. And while that truth is painful, it also brings closure, a chance to begin healing. Linda's tears had dried into streaks on her cheeks. She looked at Rachel and Mark, finally allowing herself to smile faintly. I wish we had known sooner, she whispered. But at least now, we can move forward. Mark exhaled, his chest heavy but freer than it had been in years. It still hurts, he admitted. But at least we have answers. That's better than living in questions. Rachel nodded, gripping both of her parents' hands. We can finally stop imagining all the what-ifs. We know the truth, and that changes everything. Dr. Phil turned to the audience. And that's the power of seeking the truth. Even after decades, even when it seems impossible, answers can arrive. Sometimes, they arrive in ways you never expected, and they force you to confront emotions you buried long ago. The cameras panned across the audience, showing people leaning forward, some with tears in their eyes, others quietly nodding. Every viewer watching at home felt the intensity and the release of the family's journey. Dr. Phil continued, for everyone watching this story unfold, let it remind you that life can be unpredictable. People make choices, situations spiral, and sometimes the truth remains hidden. But healing always starts when we face reality with courage, honesty, and compassion. Linda reached for Dr. Phil's hand and squeezed it. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for helping us finally understand. Dr. Phil gave a reassuring smile. You've done the hard part yourself. All I did was guide you through it. The courage, the honesty, that's yours. He turned back to the camera, addressing the viewers directly. If this story touched you, if you believe families deserve answers, and that truth, no matter how painful, can bring freedom, I want you to do something right now. Type hope in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to see that closure is possible. The family slowly rose from their seats. The audience gave a standing ovation, clapping and cheering. Cameras captured every tear, every embrace, every moment of relief. For the first time in 30 years, the absence of Thomas felt a little less heavy. The void of uncertainty had finally been filled with understanding and compassion. As the show wrapped, Dr. Phil spoke one last time. Remember, no matter how long a mystery lasts, no matter how deep a secret runs, truth and love can heal even the oldest wounds. The cameras cut to a montage of social media reactions already flooding in. Viewers from around the world shared messages of empathy, Messages of strength and messages of hope. Comments poured in. Wow, I cried with this family. This is why honesty matters. Hope really does come after years of pain. And somewhere in the hearts of everyone watching, a lesson lingered. That even after 30 years, the courage to face the truth can bring families back together, restore faith in humanity, and remind us all of the power of resilience and love. The show ended, but the story lived on. Viral, inspiring, and unforgettable.